Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. IT/help desk workers. What is the most ridiculous/amusing/stupid situation you have found yourself in? I worked for a somewhat small company, read no backup or offsite systems in the evening hours by myself. One evening, there was a massive power outage in the area. Talking a large portion of the city was without power for a long time. All our battery backups were running out of power, so we had to shut down all the servers. So, I'm standing in the server room with a flashlight shutting down servers, the whole building is pitch black, all the streets are pitch black, you get the idea. There is no power anywhere. In walks the CEO who asks me why his email is not working. I kinda just look at him for a moment, not sure how to respond given the situation. I explained to him that since the power is out in pretty much the whole city, our email is down too because the servers have nothing to power them. It took a few times to get it to sink in. He then tells me to send him emails with status updates on when email will be back up and walks out. Me. Hello, IT. Have you tried turning it off and back on again? Them. Yes, I have been getting a bunch of pop-up messages on my screen. Me. Sounds like you have a virus. Them. Yes, in fact, I called a friend of mine who mentioned something about spyware. I googled the word spyware and attempted to install a few of them that I found. I think the problem actually got worse. I had to mute the phone while I laughed. I think one of the most annoying things that happens all too frequently to me is when someone calls in. I try not to insult their intelligence or lack thereof, but I always ask, is it plugged in? Is it turned on? Check the connections? Okay. So a lady called in as her printer had arrived. I only deal with employees of the company and wanted my help hooking it up. Knowing that it was a Windows 7 machine, I told her to just plug the USB cable into the computer and it should automatically do the rest. She called me back and said it won't show up, it's not doing anything, etc. I asked, is the power plugged in? She said, yes, of course. So I talked to her for over an hour doing different things. It happened to be a computer that wasn't on our domain and I had to instruct her step by step where to click. She didn't know what a taskbar was, nor what the start menu meant, so this was rather difficult. After about an hour, she says, I'll have to call you back. She never did. A day later, I called her back and asked if we could finish setting up the printer, and she said, oh, I didn't call you back because when we got off the phone, I realized that I didn't plug the power into the wall. Once I did that, it worked. Thanks, though. I was speechless, and I just hung up. So, if you're computer illiterate and calling for support, if someone asks you, did you try this or that, humor them. Try again while they're on the line. Don't just assume you did. Do everything they ask you, even if you've already done it. It's possible it'll work the second time around. Don't waste over an hour of their day because you didn't listen to the first question they asked you. Thanks! Here is what happened. One department of the library which does archiving is mostly made up of older women, 50s to 80s. It was our understanding that one of the much older librarians who doesn't even use a computer for her work had accidentally cut the Ethernet cord. Why she was cutting anything is still a mystery. Why she was cutting something near the network hub is a bigger one. Not knowing what the cable was for or where it went, a 150-foot cable going up and down the walls, tied the ends she cut together and hoped for the best. The next day when it was found out, an entire row of computers failed to check in. I was sent to diagnose the problem. By the way, these librarians only use computers when needed. After finding the cut cable, I ultra quadruple facepalm table hybrid. Then I went on to fix the problem by installing a new cable. I worked at some local radio stations fixing computers. I got a call from the head marketing director for all the stations. She was describing a dead laptop battery, so I asked if the laptop was plugged in. The question made her very combative. After a few minutes of trying to get her to troubleshoot the problem over the phone, it was clear she wasn't doing any of the steps. When I arrived, I immediately went to the power strip. The power strip was plugged in, into itself. I pulled it out so she could see it. She became very embarrassed, stammered a bit, then became very angry. She was a problem user and had numerous issues with her computer. She brought up previous issues, blamed the past issues on my incompetence, and said that I plugged the power strip into itself. I began to get fairly angry at the accusations. Quickly, I plugged the power strip into the wall and turned the laptop on. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Then why does it work now?" I turned and exited her office as she was screaming at me. I've never been so close to losing my professional composure in my whole career. Took her 3 weeks before her computer problems became such an issue that she apologized. My favorite OS moment was when we were going to upgrade a NetWare server to a new machine and new version of the OS. We got to the point where we were figuring out data migration, and I can't recall if this was before NetWare made tools to make it easier, or if the version we were upgrading was so old it wouldn't matter, and my boss told me to use the beta version of Ghost for NetWare. I was reluctant, as it was a beta, but he assured me it was fine and that he'd done a test run with the versions we were going to hit. My plan prior to that was to copy everything over and redo permissions. The server wasn't that complicated, and rebuilding their schema from scratch would be a breeze. They had mirrored drives, so I broke the mirror, pulled the drive, and started Ghost. It got a little way through the process and crashed. Somehow during the crash, or perhaps it caused the crash, the NetWare partition on the drive crashed. No big deal, I've got the mirrored drive in the old server. Only that's corrupted too. I ended up having to restore everything from a tape onto the new server and going back through and double checking all the permissions. From that point on, I almost completely disregarded what the boss told me to do. My funniest moment was talking someone through why their fax modem wouldn't work. Everything sounded right, the configuration was good, it connected to our fax machine, but nothing came through. I finally had him talk me through exactly what he was doing. When he said, "I'm holding the piece of paper up to the monitor," I nearly lost it. I had enough composure to ask politely if I could put him on hold for a minute, and then spent a couple of minutes laughing my A off. Once I got sane again, I politely informed him he'd have to fax from within a program and life was good. I've been in IT for quite a few years now, but I started on campus while in college. There are 2 distinct times I should have been fired. 1. There was this guy that we worked with that mostly everyone hated. A regular Buzz Lightyear. A kiss-a. Just the perfect guy you want to punch in the face to get rid of his smug smile. We used Heat to enter tickets, which would be attached to our login identities. This guy decided to write a new script to make tickets easier. What the script did was take the ticket form and turn it into a series of pop-ups asking you questions. So instead of just tabbing through a form, putting in the phone number and username and problem type, you would get a pop-up asking, "What is customer's phone number?" etc. I think it was just a macro script, but I hated him and I hate it. So one night after hours, I was mocking him with my coworker friend and was showing him the stupid script he wrote. I put in a bunch of BS answers since it wasn't a real ticket, but when it came to the "what is the problem" box, I wrote in "you suck D," because in our minds, we were referring to the guy we hated. Afterwards, I X'd out of the script and we laughed about how stupid the thing was, mostly because everyone naturally hates pop-ups, so why not turn the entire thing into a series of them? Next day I come in and immediately get whisked away to the boss's office. In his hand is an email from the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, a man I have only met once because he works in the admin building with all the big shots. He had received an email from my email account with a trouble ticket that told him he sucked D, and was understandably confused. The guy we hated had wrote into his macro script an auto-send. Apparently, once you start the script, that ticket will be sent out even if it's not completed. Completely idiotic script which breaks all GUI conventions. So I had inadvertently emailed the CTO and told him he is a D-sucker. Thankfully, the CTO was a rational guy and realized that I probably did not mean to do this, and I explained that I was just messing around with the new script and I had no idea it was being sent out. I took some heat, but they scrapped that D micro because of it. So awkward. 2. You had to clock in and clock out by signing in with your email to the time clock server when you arrived. This thing ran off a server from the 80s in the basement of another building, and it could only be accessed from on-campus IPs. I worked Saturday morning sometimes, and when doing so, it was just me and my friend, no management, usually. After drinking Friday, getting to work on time Saturday morning was difficult. I lived off campus. However, I figured out you could use VPN in using their client at home, and then I could access the time clock machine. So one Saturday, I was particularly running late. I clocked in from home, told my coworker I would be an hour late, took a shower, and came in to find my boss was in the office. He had come in this morning for some reason. He was a bit ticked I was late, but didn't give me too much grief. However, now I was struck with a pretty serious issue. He would see I clocked in on time, but knew I wasn't there. My heart sank. I spent the next day trying to invent an acceptable cover story, when, like an act from God, the following Monday, the time clock server burned out. The D thing just quit. They lost all time clock data too. We had to fill out our 2-week time clocks by hand on the honor system. I filled it out very conservatively and stopped screwing around. Figured it was my big break and I needed to be more serious about my job. The timing of that crash, though, still amazes me. So I was working as the network admin at an ISP with about 60 employees when the mail server falls over at 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Geek part, this was not an easy fix as we were, from memory, running an Exchange 4.1 instance on Windows NT4 and we no longer had the disks for either. Now all we had was Exchange 2000 and Advanced Server 2000, Geek part, S. To cut a long story short, after much downloading, screaming, frustration, Red Bull, and terrible food from the adjacent 7-Eleven, I finally get the server up and running at about 4:30 a.m. when I went home and went to bed. After getting up a few hours later, I headed into the office. However, I was headed off by the HR manager on the way in the door. HR, Azir, can you come with me into my office, please? AZ, sure, no problem. So in we walk. In there is my manager, the HR manager, one of the directors, and myself. Of everybody, the HR manager looks visibly annoyed. My manager kicks off proceedings. MGR. Azir, first of all, let me thank you for getting the mail server back up and running. We know you worked well into the morning, and we appreciate that. AZ. Sure, no problems. What's this all? HR. Azir, did you send any test emails last night? AZ. Well, yeah, I had to make sure it was working. HR. Did you send this? With this, she turns around a monitor showing an email. From administrator, subject, effing work. Body, for F's sake, work, you piece of S. AZ. Oh, S. Yeah, I was pretty tired and was having some trouble. HR. Do you realize you sent that to the entire company? It was about here that it dawned on me. Sure, I got the mail server working, but in doing so, I managed to send an email to every single employee from the administrator, calling them a piece of S and questioning their work ethic. I was speechless. I looked at the director, who had a hint of a smile on his face when he said, "From now on, how about we put 'this is a test' in the test emails?" AZ. That sounds like a good idea. DIR. Good work with the mail server. Off you go. As the HR manager was new, I'm pretty sure she wanted to fire me to stamp her authority in the company. This may have explained the heated conversation I caught the tail end of after closing the door. Fortunately, upper management saw the funny side and had my back. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and the likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.